A few weeks ago, if you caught the Oscars, you might have watched actress Viola Davis step on the stage to accept her Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. It was quite a moment for her. Now, in her line of work, of course, winning an Oscar is the pinnacle of success. But listen to this. She recently told ABC News that she feels like a, quote, imposter, and that everyone will see me for the hack that I am. That's crazy, because you're going, she is an amazing actress. How is this possible? But if you've ever had those same feelings of self-doubt in your own life, or maybe your career, or in any success you've had, you are clearly not alone. There is a term for these feelings. It's called imposter syndrome. So joining us now to talk more about imposter syndrome and really what it is, Dr. Elizabeth Mead with Swedish Medical Center. Thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome.
I have not heard this term, but it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about imposter syndrome.
So this was a term that was coined in the 70s by a couple of psychologists who found, and that study was among really high achieving women, that found that this particular group of people always felt like they were kind of a fake or a fraud, they weren't qualified, they weren't deserving of their success, and that somebody was going to find out and they would, the whole thing would kind of go to pot.
Why? I guess, well, I should ask first, because you mentioned it was coined in the 70s when talking about women. Is this affecting women more or men more?
You know, in research since then, we actually think it affects men and women pretty equally. But I think, number one, women are more willing to talk about it, especially as we have this conversation with Lean In and all these other public figures that are coming out talking about it. And I think there are some traits that make women a little bit more susceptible to it as well.
Why on earth is this happening? I mean, why can't we just have something good happen to us and think, okay, great, something great happened, or I earned this, or I'm deserving of this?
Right. Well, I think it's hard. I think, you know, this tends to happen among really high-achieving, perfectionistic people, and so they think that they always have to do everything exactly right. So there's this fear that if you don't do it perfectly, someone's going to realize you're completely unqualified and you don't deserve any of the successes that you've had.
That's such an extremist attitude to have. I have to admit that I've felt this way.
Yeah.
How can we possibly cope with these types of feelings?
So interestingly, most people have probably felt this at one time or another, and it does tend to be a little more common amongst people that are different than their peer group or their colleague group somehow. So people, either women or minorities or people who are a different sexual orientation. There's lots of different categories that make people a little bit more at risk for this. But I think when we think about how to fix it or what to do about it, really talking to people that have experienced the same thing is important. And since most of us have, it's actually not too hard to find those people. Having mentors who've experienced it is great. And then actually we find that mentoring other people that are sort of coming up below you is super helpful, because you start to realize, I do have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge, and I can actually teach people things.
That's a really great way to think about it too, because I think then once that comes to the surface and you go, okay, I have something to offer here.
Exactly. I think it's really important to own your success, and this is something that women in particular are extremely bad at.
Yeah.
Right? So if someone compliments us or says you did a great job, we tend to either say, oh, I got really lucky, or lots of people helped me, or we don't really internalize that.
Yeah.
And so just to be able to say thank you, I'm really proud of that, is something that's hard for us, but that can often be the first step towards getting around these negative feelings.
So talk also about the first step of maybe about quieting those voices. Like the moment you hear that voice in your head go, you're a fraud.
Yeah.
What do you do to shut it up?
I think, A, it's really important to realize that nobody is perfect. You are not going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes, and that's okay, right? So that's number one. And then I think number two is, again, to think about the achievements and the successes that you've had that you feel like you really deserved, and then kind of branch out from there.
Now, I know that we sort of live in a world where we think, we're growing up and we're giving kids, everyone gets a participation trophy. So I don't want to give it that point, I guess. But what I want to know is, as a parent, how can you maybe quell this before it gets out of control?
Yeah, well, it does tend to be more prevalent probably in people who have a lot of pressure at home.
Okay.
So if you're alternating that cycle with your kids of expecting them to do everything perfectly and then kind of reprimanding them if they don't, you really want to get out of that habit.
Okay.
So realizing that it's okay for your kids to make mistakes, and it actually teaches them to be a more resilient, more thoughtful, mindful person is really important. Letting them fix their own problems is really helpful. So not trying to make everything perfect all the time. That's probably a great first step.
That's a really good idea, and sort of, I guess, striking that balance between, okay, not everyone gets a participation trophy, but you also earned what you earned. You
know, I think we've talked about this before, but complimenting your kids when they deserve it is really important. Complimenting them or rewarding them for things that they don't really deserve isn't great, because it sets up a dynamic that they always are striving for that. And so really you want to reward your kids when they feel like you feel like they've done something that actually merits that reward.
This is really interesting. Dr. Mead, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's great to shed some light on this.
Yeah, it's great to talk about it.
Absolutely.